In recent times, a new word's entered the board lexicon. It's overboarding. So what exactly is overboarding? Well, some directors, because of their skills, their experience, their reputation, get asked to sit on a lot of boards. And there's many benefits in a director sitting on multiple boards. They can share insights and experiences across those boards. But they also run the risk, if they sit on too many boards, of not being able to contribute the time and energy to each of those board roles effectively. And that's overboarding. So hallmarks of a director being overboard are things like a director not being able to engage in deep reflective thinking, not being able to regularly attend events outside of board meetings, so stakeholder events, board committee meetings perhaps, and also not being able to easily manage their diary when there might be an urgent board meeting called or there might be a crisis, for example. So how do you stop overboarding? Well, as an individual director, I think there's a couple of key things, and that is choose board roles carefully. I see some executives leave their executive career, go into board roles, and very keen to just pick up board roles. So they end up perhaps taking on a couple of roles, then they got offered more attractive roles, and before they know it, they've got 6, 7, and 8 board roles. So being a little bit more careful, a little bit more reflective about what roles you take on is important. Also managing your annual work plan. So boards will typically meet in the 3rd or 4th week of the month. How do you plan around that? How do you make sure you've also got time in your diary for some professional development, for the crises that might come up, both in a work context and a personal context? How do you put in some time for annual leave, for example? And using that annual work plan to guide what you take on. From a board perspective, you also want to make sure that your directors aren't overboarded. You want to make sure you've got directors who have got the time and the ability and the flexibility to perform their roles well. So recruiting well is important in this context. Are you making sure you're asking candidate directors what their other commitments are and how they're going to manage taking on a new board role as well? Also asking directors to alert their peers as soon as they're looking at taking on another board role is important, and undertaking regular board performance evaluations where you're making sure that everyone is contributing well to the board is another key way to be able to manage overboarding from a board perspective. A question that sometimes arises is, well, how many boards can an individual sit on before they're overboarded? Now that's a deeper question, and that's one that we might deal with in another forum, but it's a good question perhaps to ponder. So hopefully there's some useful information there on what overboarding is, how you prevent yourself from being overboarded, and if you're on a board, making sure that your peers aren't also overboarded.